Yo, yo, what's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. As always, I'm your co host, Marcus, and I'm joined by my co host, Mason. We're here to talk about all of the big matchups coming up this week in college football. Better late than never. We're running a little bit late tonight. I was a little late getting graphics ready. Mason had a meeting in Atlanta today. So we just get in here and get it in how we can get it in. And we are so glad that you have joined us here this evening. If you could, hit that subscribe button. We hope you'll consider doing that. We're building a nice little community of college football fans here at First and Long, and we hope that you will hit the like button for us and help us get the good word out. Mason, how are you today, man? We're just on the fly today. Busy day.
It has been a busy day, Mark. And I'm battling a little bit of a head cold, so I apologize ahead of time. I've got my my throat coat tea here, and my wife's teacup. So I am doing what I can to bring you guys the good word about college football this week. Not a super exciting week. I think there's one top 25 matchup in if you go by the AP's top 25. But that doesn't mean it won't be exciting. We have grown accustomed to those. Sorry, Mark. There's a little bit of an echo. If you could turn your volume down just a bit. Um, but but yeah, we've grown accustomed to the weeks where there's been lesser games, I guess you could say, lesser being the most exciting weeks. So still going to be a fun week for us. We've got four big games to break down this tonight for this week, and excited to get into it with you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the Week 6 preview and prediction show, and here we go. Guys, leave your comments in the comment section here if you're watching live or if you're watching later. It doesn't really matter. We try to be as good as we can at responding to all those comments, and you guys have not disappointed this week. We've had tons of great college football conversation in the comment section with our early previews that we did on these games, and now we've dove a little deeper into some of these teams and got a little better understanding of some of these football teams here, and we're ready to bring it to you today. So put your comments in the comment section. We'll read them kind of in between, as you know, in between the previews and predictions that we're doing here, because of course here on the First and Long Show, we do all our clips live with you guys. We want your input. We want you guys to join along, but we're going to clip these up later and release them. So if you miss one, you can't hang out the whole time. Go on to the videos portion there, and these will all be uploaded over the next 24 hours. Uh, all right, Mason, let's jump into it, and let's go most interesting first, right? And honestly, most interesting wise, I think would probably be Missouri Texas A&M. So let's jump into that one first. Noon, it's an SEC matchup at Kyle Field. Texas A&M is hosting the Missouri Tigers. Texas A&M opened up as a 2.5 point favorite and now sitting at about a 2 point favorite in most places that I've looked. Over under is set at 48.5 for this one. Texas A&M has already been on a little bit of a roller coaster ride this season, right? With the week 1 game against Notre Dame, I think the team met expectations in some ways and kind of fell short of expectations in other ways. I guess you would point to offensively. And Missouri this season was a darling coming out of 2023. Beat Ohio State to end the season, and everybody, so and so sat out, blah, blah, blah. I know everybody had somebody sit out, but Missouri was a damn good football team last year, guys. And I think they're a good football team again. And statistically, we're going to look at them here in just a second. They are a good team on paper, but they've got a few flaws, and it's kind of cost them a couple of times this year, or it almost cost Vanderbilt into overtime there. Vanderbilt misses a kick. And then some people would point to the Boston College, margin of victory in that football game and say, Missouri didn't meet expectations there. So both teams have had games that were certainly lackluster, and both teams' fan bases are carrying, some serious expectations for both of these teams going forward. The Texas A&M fans have been loud and clear that they are fully behind Mike Elko at Texas A&M right now, and they believe in the direction that this program is headed. Let's jump into the matchup a little bit deeper. Brady Cook returns to Missouri, and in my opinion, in the preseason, I had Brady Cook on up there with some of the best college football quarterbacks that were returning. I felt like this was a no-brainer for Missouri. A lot of guys coming back on offense. We'll get to some of those, but Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, you go in the transfer portal, you pick up Nate Noel, Marcus Carroll, and all those things have worked out pretty well, except for the fact that this team has had issues getting to the red zone, and we'll kind of get into the statistics, but you can see there, Brady Cook with only 4 touchdowns this year, with the weapons that he has, you would feel, you feel like you'd be, he'd have more touchdowns at this point. I guess I should just leave it at that. Texas A&M, on the other hand, Connor Wegman went down. We don't know when he's coming back. I said it in the early preview this week. I don't know that it matters when Connor Wegman is coming back, but Marcel Reed has stepped in, and it feels like the fan base has really kind of embraced him. And he brings something to the offense that Connor Wegman just doesn't bring to the offense, Mason, and that's being able to run the football. And this team, look, besides Le'Veon Moss, who has been very consistent and definitely the most consistent playmaker on this football team offensively, Marcel Reed is a, much welcomed addition to the rushing room or production room in general, because this offense just ain't had a whole lot of production to begin with. Not a whole lot of playmakers, in the wide receiver room at this point. So any edge that you can get, you'll take right now. And Marcel Reed, with his rushing ability, I think provides an edge over what Connor Wegman brought to the offense. What do you think about the quarterbacks in this one?
Yeah, I mean, Brady Cook, obviously the more proven quarterback. He's the guy that we've seen for the past couple of years now for Mizzou, but so far this season hasn't really showed up statistically. When you watch him play, I think that it's fair to say that there's been a little bit of a regression in his play so far, but ultimately I think we're all just kind of waiting on this Missouri offense and with Brady Cook to turn the corner and really get going here. It seemed like they were doing well early on in the season, but as of lately they've kind of been sputtering just a bit. Of course, against McNeese State, excuse me, I had Texas A&M's schedule pulled up there, but against Murray State they scored 51 points. Buffalo, they scored 38. And then against Boston College, 27, against Vandy, 30. I mean, these aren't necessarily like small numbers, but we expected more against this, for this schedule for Missouri. You would expect a little bit more out of the offense. I do think that they will get things together, but going against this Texas A&M defense isn't exactly like where you start to get right? Now they are coming off of a bye, which I think is going to help them, but did they get better in the bye week? That's my biggest question for the offense and for Brady Cook. And then Marcel Reed, it sounds like they're going to stick with Marcel. I certainly hope that they do. Connor Wegman is going to be back and available for this game, but are they going to go back to Wegman? I kind of hope not, because I think Marcel Reed gives you another dimension with his legs in a way that Wegman did not. And he's a better fit for this offense. I think with the way that they want to play offense, having that extra dimension with the legs certainly opens up the playbook a little bit more. I like the trajectory of Marcel Reed. I think he's still very unproven, but as of right now, I think he's your better option at quarterback. And if Texas A&M wants to win this game, I think he's got to play.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, look, Mason, I mean, I've done a little bit of digging on this team, and we talked about it a little bit in our early preview. But excuse me, I didn't mean to go forward yet. This team's just not very explosive, and that's really, really, really surprising to me. And the numbers back up exactly what I'm saying. I mean, 76 in the country in yards from scrimmage, 10 plus yards. or plays 10-plus yards from scrimmage. That 60 plays, that's good for 76 in the country, 107th in the country with 15 plays of 20-plus yards. This team's just not very explosive right now. And part of me begs, it begs the question, does Missouri have a trick or two up their sleeve for this football game? And if you look at their schedule, you can point to a lot of football games in there that you're like, I don't know that you're pulling out the entire playbook for this team. And that's pretty much Missouri's whole schedule so far. It hasn't been a bunch of good teams. Now, Boston College is a lot better than what we thought they were at the time. So Missouri not covering the spread in that football game, looking back, it doesn't surprise me. At that time, it surprised me. But back to my point here, somebody's got to be a playmaker on this offense, and we're just not really seeing it. Another issue that I see is in the red zone. Missouri's red zone touchdown percentage is at 65%. That's good for 58th in the country. So when they get in the red zone, they're only scoring a touchdown 65% of the time. And while that's, still top half of America, right, as far as national rankings, that's not where you want to be and not where this offense should be. So when the field shrinks is when this team has a little bit of issues. And we're going to talk about the Texas A&M defense here in just a minute, and that just feeds right into what this defense wants to do out there on the field. So it is a bit of a concern. The only thing I could say for Missouri at this point is like I said, maybe they've got some tricks up their sleeve that they haven't been ready to, pull that card out yet. And we're going to find out because, this is definitely the best defense that Missouri has faced this year, and it's not even close. What are your thoughts just on the offense overall, Mason? 29th in points per game. That's with 36.5. 19th in total offense, 472.5 yards per game. Like, they're getting the yards, but not the points. Rush yards per game, 206.5. That's 26th in the country. 5.16 yards per rush. That's 41st in the country. They're pretty good everywhere. Average yards per pass attempt, 84th in the country. That's not great. But most of these stats, they're pretty good. Like I said, it's the explosives, it's the getting in the red zone and kicking field goals instead of scoring touchdowns. And if Missouri gets in this football game and they're kicking field goals instead of touchdowns, they're going to be playing right into the hand of Texas A&M, who's going to have 110 or 12,000 people screaming down the back of their neck. And it's going to be really, really tough to deal with. Got to convert in the red zone this weekend if Missouri wants to win this football game. Hey, I think you're muted. Are you not?
My bad. I had a little cough attack there. I had to mute myself for and forgot to unmute myself. So, but anyways, I think statistically, going back to what you were talking about with Mizzou, those numbers aren't bad. Like, it's not, those are winnable numbers, on offense. But the question for me is, you were doing that against Murray, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vandy. Like, what are you going to do against a defense like Texas A&M? And I think that's what Vegas is also looking at. Texas A&M is favored in this game. It's a home game for them, but Missouri is a top 10 team. That doesn't make sense to most people, but then when you see what they do on the field, it kind of does make a lot of sense. Texas A&M has faced a solid defense in Notre Dame's, and they scored 13 points, but ultimately I feel like based off of who they've played in Notre Dame, Florida, I guess you could say, and Arkansas, they have a little bit better resume overall in level of competition. So to me, I'm with you. This Missouri offense has got to get going if they want to really make a chance or play in the playoffs, which is kind of where we thought that this team would be. We thought going into this season, Missouri would be a fringe playoff team. To me, I think that the offense is behind the defense right now, and this is a game that Missouri's got to win. They really need to win this game if they want to stay in the race for the playoffs. With the schedule that they have, this is a must win, and it's a game that we had circled in the preseason as well. But ultimately, I mean, I really like what they've done in the rushing game with Nate Noel. He's averaging 6.4 yards per carry. Got 2 touchdowns only, but 441 yards total. That's really good in the running game. But you're gonna struggle if you try to go into this game and win it on the ground. It's going to be really tough against this defensive line for Texas A&M. They're going to have to win it over the top at some point in this game. And so far this season, they haven't proven that they can do that. But we saw it last year with the same players, the same skill position players. They were pretty explosive in a lot of areas, and I'm wondering if we're going to see that this week or not. That's really the only question I have, is if they can get out of the dink and dunk system, win with some explosive plays, and we'll know in the first half if they're going to be able to do that or not.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's talk about this defense for just a minute. Corey Batoon takes over for Blake Baker after last season, and with the departures of some really obviously talented players off of this defense that left for the NFL, it left a lot of people like me wondering, what this defense was going to end up looking like. And while it hasn't been a perfect performance in 2024, I guess it's been about as good as what you could expect from like I said, replacing all the talent you did, replacing a defensive coordinator. For all intents and purposes, we talked in the offseason, the offense was going to need to carry this team through the front part of the schedule, and so that this defense could get their footing. And it hasn't been that at all. Now, like you said, the schedule hasn't been difficult. Boston College, the hardest game they've played. But with all that being said, look at these numbers. I mean, they're really, really good. And this defense, it's very, very clear that the numbers tell a very certain story about this defense. They're a good fundamental group, but they're not going to create like a ton of havoc, or at least they haven't yet. They're not going to create a ton of turnovers. And honestly, they are the inverse of Texas A&M. Texas A&M will give you some yards, and I'm not saying they give up a ton of yards. That's not the case, but they'll give you more yards, but they're going to create sacks. They're going to create tackles for loss. They're going to create interceptions. Missouri is more of keep everything in front of us. Plays allowed of 10-plus yards this season, they've only allowed 28 of them. That's number 1 in the country. And like I said, take it with a grain of salt. I know who they've played, yada, yada, yada. But at this point, we're almost halfway through the season, right? So we got to start looking at some stats, and stats are really starting to mean something. And Missouri has been really, really good at just keeping everything in front of them, making their tackles, holding opponents, to where they can't rush the ball and getting them in obvious passing downs. Been great on third down, allowing 25% for opponents on third down. That's good for 7th in the country. For this offense, I feel like you're going to need to create, for this defense in this game for Missouri, I think you're going to need to create a turnover here to really secure the Missouri victory. You've got to figure out a way to get the football one way or another, whether it's interceptions. 3 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries this season. So haven't been super active as far as taking the ball away. Got to figure out a way to do that this weekend, and I think that would go a long way in Missouri being able to win this football game. Now, Texas A&M people, y'all don't go anywhere. We're about to talk Texas A&M here in a minute. I know you're probably tired of hearing about Missouri, but just give me just a second here, and we'll get over to Texas A&M. Mason, what do you think about this defense? I'm really impressed with it so far this season. They're not exactly going against an offensive juggernaut in Texas A&M, although I will say they run the ball pretty damn well. We'll look at all their stats here in just a minute and kind of what they've been able to do on offense. They run the ball really well. Marcel Reed accentuates that for Texas A&M. We'll really get to see, what the line of scrimmage looks like defensively for Missouri in this football game. What do you think about the defense?
Yeah, well, so far this season, the Achilles heel for Missouri's defense has been running quarterbacks, and that's perfect for this game plan with Marcel Reed. But you look at what Diego Pavia did last week with Vanderbilt, right? Kept it really close. You look at what Boston College did with Castellanos, kept it really close. Marcel Reed kind of fits that paradigm, and I think that they could struggle with Marcel Reed. But ultimately, I mean, as a whole, they've been really good. I'm just concerned about them. I mean, you could make an argument. I'd listen to you if you told me that Texas A&M's offense is the best that they've faced yet. I mean, that's who else would you put in there? Boston College and Vanderbilt. I mean, I would put Texas A&M's offense probably ahead of them when you look at just the personnel and the skill position players that they have. I think that they could get it done this week. When you have a running quarterback, it really causes a lot of issues for the defense because Texas A&M doesn't really have the outside skill position players that you would really need to bracket a wide receiver or a tight end or anything like that. So, maybe they can spy and play man on the outside, but there's no doubt that Marcel Reed with the extra dimension, the added dimension of his legs, adds a different element to this offense and causes stress on the Missouri defense. How are they going to handle that when they're facing a decent offensive line? I don't know. That's kind of the question to me is can they contain Marcel Reed, make sure that he doesn't get outside of the pocket? And that's a big ask, I think, for this defense right now.
Yeah. What we have to ask this defense to do in this football game is to do what they haven't done all year, and that's create havoc. They've got to figure out a way to do that, and this is the game that they're going to need to do it because their offense, Missouri's not going and scoring 40 points in this football game. I mean, that's we can go ahead and eliminate that off the board. That's not happening. So the defense is going to have to step up one way, shape, form, or another. And they're going to have to do some of the things that they haven't done this season to be able to get out of Kyle Field alive. Let's go over to the Texas A&M side of things, and we'll start with the offense. It obviously hasn't been great. Okay, it's been a big transition. I don't think anybody expected this offense to be, top 25 in the country or anything like that this season. Have they played their best football yet? I don't think so. I think this team is still figuring out their identity, right? And figuring out a way to move the ball through the air some. That has been a big issue for this team. 162 yards a game passing. I know Notre Dame has a really good defense. So week one, I'm not even considering that. But if you look at some of these other football games that Texas A&M has played, why can't you throw on Florida or Bowling Green or Arkansas, who don't have good secondaries at all? I'm just being kind of devil's advocate here. I'm asking the question. I already know the answer because this offense is in kind of disarray. It's been in disarray up until this point. I think they're starting to get their footing with the rushing attack, Marcel being able to take off, pick up third downs with his feet, help that rushing game. Le'Veon Moss can't do it by himself. He's done a really, really nice job this season, but he can't do it by himself. So Marcel Reed coming to help in that aspect, I think is really big. Do we all trust Marcel Reed to be able to throw the rock around? No, that's not going to happen. I think Texas A&M's offense has one mode right now, and it's kind of just low gear, and you can't get behind the sticks, right? And they just got to do their best not to turn the football over and run it successfully and run it again and run it successfully again. I think that's kind of what this offense is right now until somebody steps up in the wide receiver room. Not very explosive. You can see the plays of 10-plus yards, 20-plus yards, 64, 75th in the country. Just not great with those numbers. Third down conversion, 38.71. That's not great, and that's exactly my point. Got to stay ahead of chains here in this football game and run the football, and that's got to be the recipe for Texas A&M. That offensive line's going to have to get a push this weekend. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but one thing I would look at with the receivers for Texas A&M, they've got 6 receivers that have all had a touchdown. So even though there's not that one kind of go-to guy who has been able to kind of just be the bell cow when it comes to catching the football, they are spreading the ball around pretty good. And you couple some adequate ball playing skills that have come from the receivers with Le'Veon Moss and his effectiveness in the run game. And I do think that there is a recipe for success here for Texas A&M, and of course, playing at home never hurts. But yeah, I mean this is kind of what we expected, though. I think from the Texas A&M offense, we weren't expecting a top half SEC offense or anything like that right out of the gate. I mean, this is a brand new coaching system and a lot of new players, especially with Wegman going out and really not living up to his potential when he was playing early in the season. I think given all of those factors, the offense has been pretty good so far. And they're really, I think the offensive line has held up pretty decently. They've got a tall task though with Missouri this week. And, but I think that this is a game that you can look at if you're Texas A&M. If you're able to score some points, you can really build some momentum on the offensive side of the football through this game because, like I said, it's a tall task with the Missouri defense.
Yeah, and like I said, I think Marcel's going to help a lot on third down. Being able to pick up those short yardage third downs. A running quarterback just helps so much with that type of thing. And yeah, I mean, you're going to have to hit an explosive play. I mean, this team hasn't thrown for over 200 yards in a game yet this season. I don't believe there's been a receiver that's had over 100 yards receiving in a game yet. There's only 2 receivers that have over 100 yards for the whole season. But like I said, somebody's just got to step up this weekend. What's happened to Texas A&M in the past doesn't mean that's what's going to happen this weekend. But my point in all this is somebody's got to step up because if you think that you're going to just line it up and run it down Missouri's throat all afternoon, I just think you got another thing coming. I don't think this Texas A&M offensive line is good enough to be able to do that all day long.
Yeah.
We'll see. Like I said, you got to have a trick up your sleeve. I'm sure Mr. Elko has exactly that. Let's talk about this defense. Look, guys, you look at these numbers. They're not overwhelming. They're not unbelievable. But they create a lot of havoc. Lots of turnovers this season. They've gained 9 turnovers. That's good for 16th in the country. 32 tackles for loss. That's good for 29th in the country. 8 sacks. That's not great, but third down percentage allowed, 30.16. That's pretty doggone good. And then red zone touchdown percentage allowed, 45.45%. So this is a bend don't break defense. That's what is going on here. It's once we get you bottled up on one side of the field or the other, we feast. And between the 20s, they're trying to just keep everything in front of them. And Mike Elko is a defensive mastermind. I mean, it's well known in college football. We've all known what he did the last time he was at Texas A&M, and I have every reason to believe that he's going to be doing that again. And they are currently having a pretty good season on that side of the football. There was a couple of games this season where like Bowling Green. Look, Bowling Green can just pass the ball pretty well. So some people might look at that game and say, and it was a little too close. Bowling Green shouldn't be playing that close to Texas A&M, but Bowling Green can throw the football around. I mean, and they did a little bit in that football game, and I think that's what made it as close as it was. But for the most part, this defense has been pretty good at not allowing teams into the end zone in most cases. I think it's a pretty doggone good defense. I think the defensive line is strong as hell, and it's going to really, really test Missouri's offensive line this weekend. What do you think about the defense?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The D line especially has been good up the middle. You're not running up the middle against this defensive line, pretty much. Period. And unless you've just got a really good offensive line to line up against them. But one area that I think if you're Missouri, you're looking at trying to really penetrate is the outside of the running back zone plays and things like that. That they're going to try to get Nate Noel outside of the perimeter. That's kind of his skill set anyways. So to me, if I'm looking at Texas A&M's defensive line, you got to contain, right? You got to contain Brady Cook on the outside, and you got to contain Nate Noel and this rushing attack, and keep them from moving it outside. If there is a weakness in this defense, it's been on the back end and in the secondary. So again, you got to. I mean, we talked about the Missouri offense and how they're going to have to win over the top. Well, obviously, Texas A&M is going to have to stop that from happening, because that's going to be the game plan for Missouri coming into this. Can they continue to wreak havoc in the backfield? Can they get some pressure on the quarterback, and then contain the outside on the running game? If they do all those things, I think that they will stop this Missouri attack. But ultimately, Texas A&M has been a bend don't break defense. I think that they continue to do that, but just limit the explosives, continue to play your style of football, and I think that Texas A&M can definitely have some success in this game.
Well, it's going to be up to that secondary to really step up and fill the void. If that defensive line isn't able to get home, then and I'm interested to see what Texas A&M does defensively in this football game as far as that goes. Are you bringing pressure in this football game? Are you trying to just bring 4? Right? That's what I'm most interested in. I know it'll be a mix, but I'm interested to see how they start the football game. Do they back everybody up in coverage? And because, look, it's no secret. Luther Burden is a bomb waiting to go off. And at any moment, he can just take a football game over. So it's going to be up to the secondary to be able to cover, him and Theo Weiss, who can be a pain in the butt. And have been for a lot of teams over the last few years. I just wanted to mention Will Lee, one of the standout guys there in the secondary. 6 pass deflections, an interception, 20 tackles this season. Marcus Ratcliffe's got 3 interceptions. This secondary has been the primary cause of that turnover margin and the turnovers gained that you see there on the stat sheet. The secondary has had a lot to do with that. Like I said, where they will bend, they will step up and jump a route every once in a while, and they can get up and get the ball, no doubt about it. So it'll be interesting for Cook, who has been pretty good at protecting the football. It'll be interesting to see how he faces off against this secondary, and if he's even got enough time, to try to pick that secondary apart. Let's get into our predictions for this one, Mason. Texas A&M is favored by 2. I get the 2. I really do get the 2 being at Kyle Field, and I think this is a big matchup. And we haven't seen Missouri face this level of competition this season. There's no doubt about it. I'm just not ready to bet Texas A&M to cover 2 points against Missouri at this point. I think Missouri is obviously a couple of years ahead of where Texas A&M is right now, and it's not any fault of any one Texas A&M player or a coach or obviously the fans or anything like that. I think this is a team on the rise, but I just don't think they've risen yet. And while Texas A&M has got some great football ahead of them, we haven't seen their best football this season. And I think that towards the end of the season, whenever Texas A&M goes and faces Texas at the end of the season, that's all eyes are going to be glued on that, because what we have right now versus what we're going to have at the end of the season are 2 totally different things, in my opinion. My gut has told me all week to take Missouri +2. I'm going to take Missouri plus the points here. I think this offense is able to figure out a way to get explosive enough times in this football game to win it. I think Missouri wins this football game 27-21.
Well, I'm with you in a sense that this is an unfinished product for the Aggies so far this year. I do think that by the end of the year, when they go to when they face Texas, they're going to be a much different team. But at this point, we're headed into week 6. I think that this is where Texas A&M starts to turn the page a little bit. We start to see that identity come from this A&M offense. as well as the defense. I think that the lack of explosivity from Missouri is gonna hamper them in this game. It's gonna kind of feed right into the Texas A&M defense's strategy, where they already play bend don't break, right? We know that. So if you limit the explosives, reduce Missouri's scoring capabilities down to field goals, and then I do think that this game comes down to turnovers. Whoever protects the ball the best is going to win it. And because of that, give me Texas A&M at home at Kyle Field. I think that they can win it by a field goal. Score prediction, I guess I would say probably like 20-23 would be my score prediction. That would be an under hitting in that, but I like Texas A&M here. I think that they're turning the page, and you're going to start to see the transformation of this team in this game, and then that'll crescendo to Texas at the end of the year to be a much more competitive game than what it looks like it will be right now. But give me Texas A&M, a team that's finding its identity, getting better week by week to really build some momentum in this football game and win it at home at Kyle Field.
There you have it, folks. Hey, thank y'all so much for tuning in. I certainly do appreciate it. Let's get to some of these comments here. Let me clean up my little mess here I've got in the studio real quick. Try to stay organized so I don't pull up the wrong thing here in a minute. Robert Mackenberg, I agree with Mizzou lacking explosive plays. Brady Cook is not connecting his passes to Burden and Weiss on passes that are 25-plus yards. Also, 3 missed field goals last week against Vandy is not going to cut it. Yeah, and that is just, totally not something that Missouri is used to, right? After, the thicker kicker last year. And there is no feeling like not being able to kick a field goal in a game where you desperately need a freaking field goal. Ask Alabama. Look, Alabama, even whenever they were in their run of national championships and all that stuff, and maybe they're in the run for one right now, I don't know. But they had tons of kicker issues. And when they did lose a game, it was typically because of that. There for a while. KM, you guys, I think you said, you guys are great. Thanks. It's been 48 years since I played this game. Therefore, I'm sure I don't understand what I am seeing, but I do trust Mike Elko, and he had a very positive demeanor Saturday. KM, I love Mike Elko. That's a football coach if I've ever seen one, that guy. And I would he just seems like a big old Papa Bear. You just love to play for him. It just seems like such a nice guy, defensive mastermind he is. And if he gets matched up, and I'm not saying he's not right now, it's hard to tell what Texas A&M's offense is going to be long-term right this second. But Mike Elko is matched up with the right offensive coordinator. Watch out.
Yeah.
We watched Kirby Smart do that with Todd Monken. Todd Monken, if you don't know, the best offensive coordinator in the universe right now, as far as I'm concerned. Colin plays for the Baltimore Ravens right now, and he won 2 national championships at Georgia, and I'm not sure Kirby Smart, is able to do that unless he has somebody that he can rely on to run the offense like that. So I consider Mike Elko to be a defensive mind on the same plane as a Kirby Smart.
Well, and I think they do have the right OC in Colin Klein. I just feel like Connor Wegman was not the right quarterback for Colin Klein's system. Marcel Reed is. He's the right type of quarterback, but I'm not sold yet on him as the quarterback for Texas A&M for next season and the year after that. But I think he's a better fit for this offense, and then I think that Elko's kind of seeking that first year big win. I think that this could be kind of that big win at the middle of this season here this week against Missouri.
Yeah. American Patriot, Mississippi State sucks, a fat one as usual. I'll take your word for it, American Patriot.
Maybe an Ole Miss fan. I don't know.
We're going to talk Ole Miss here in just a few minutes. They've got a big game this weekend against South Carolina. We will be breaking it down. Mississippi State does suck. You're right. Thank you for watching American Patriot. And KM, thank you for watching, buddy. I certainly do appreciate it, and I hope you're enjoying yourself. And best of luck to all you guys this weekend. If I don't pick your team, I'm just trying to call it like I see it. And, things aren't always like they seem in college football. And it's a crazy, crazy, crazy sport. Very hard to predict. You guys could be just as right as I am, or I could be wrong. Who knows? Who knows? I'm just trying to give you my best guess at this stuff. KM, I hated losing to Notre Dame with the nation looking. This is the only ranked game this weekend, and A&M has a second opportunity to change minds. Well, let me tell you something, KM. You want to talk about your team losing in front of the nation? I'm a Georgia Bulldogs fan. That's all Georgia memorabilia behind me, autographed pictures from some of the Georgia greats, guys that I've met and shook their hand, and guys that are from the state that I live in right now. I'm very proud of my Georgia Bulldogs, and what happened this past weekend, I was ready to crawl. I was ready to get my tractor out, dig a hole, crawl in it, and then get somebody to bear me, because that first half was just unbelievably embarrassing as a Georgia fan. And kudos to Kirby Smart and them for bringing the team out of the depths of fire, to be able to come back in that football game. But you talk about being in front of the nation and your team, losing. Yeah, it sucks. There's no doubt about it. And KM, last comment here, and we'll get into our next breakdown. Remember, big plays take time to develop, and that A&M D line won't give Cook enough time for deep passes. Maybe something to that. Maybe that's been what the issue's been for Missouri this season. Some admittedly, I haven't watched every single Missouri football game and every single play. So, they haven't played anybody. This is the first chance we've got to break them down on the channel, because, we're not going to break down Missouri and Vanderbilt. We're not, you know what I'm saying? So it's just, we're still learning a little bit about Missouri. The numbers are starting to tell us a story, though. And we're going to figure out exactly what that story is this weekend. All right, we got to get through some of these. Let's go. Let's go Tennessee at Arkansas. Tennessee at Arkansas, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a night game. Tennessee is favored by 13.5 points, and the over-under is set at 59.5. Arkansas, of course, coming off the loss to Texas A&M there at Jerry World, and Tennessee coming off the win at Oklahoma in Norman, greeting Oklahoma into the SEC a couple of weeks ago on a bye week last week. So Tennessee is freshened up for this one, mostly freshened up. We'll talk some injuries or whether or not there'll be injuries to be concerned with this weekend. Look, Tennessee is a 13.5 point favorite in this football game for a reason. And we'll kind of get into some of those reasons here as we break this one down. Nico Iamaleava is having a great season, okay? Has it been perfect? No, he hasn't played, I don't think, any just unbelievable football game yet. But he's doing everything that he needs to do as the quarterback of the Tennessee Vols right now, because the identity of this team is running the football. And they're really, really damn good at it. And got a group of guys that, quite frankly, I would put up against just about any running back group, in the SEC right now. Tennessee is a run-first football team right this second, while they polish up the passer that is Nico Iamaleava. Tennessee's offensive line, this has been the biggest question for this offense since the preseason. And it's not been really a question. It's a great group. But number 53 listed there, Mr. Lance Hurd, missed the Oklahoma game and caused a whole lot of shuffling around on that offensive line. This team has allowed 6 sacks this season. That's good for 44th nationally. They've ran the ball really well. Great run blocking group. Whenever this offensive line has been mixed up a little bit, filling in for so-and-so, moving everybody around, it's been a little bit rocky. But honestly, I felt like the second group of guys that came in and the third group of guys that came in felt like they did enough against a really, really good Oklahoma defense a couple of weeks ago. But we'll have to just see if Lance Hurd is going to be able to make, this football game. That's going to make a big, big difference in this one to me, whether or not Tennessee wins this thing by 17 or possibly 21 or 24 in this football game. We're going to talk Arkansas here in a minute. The strength of their defense is their defensive line. And while they're not crazy deep, those starting guys are pretty doggone good. What do you think about this Tennessee offense going against this Arkansas defense in this one? I think it has a lot to do with how healthy Tennessee is on that offensive line. I think that will translate to, a better day on Saturday, obviously, going against what I think is a pretty good D-line group for Arkansas.
Yeah, it is a pretty good D-line group, and Arkansas right now is +2 in the turnover margin per game. So to me, I'm looking at Nico, and I'm wondering if he's going to be able to protect the football. So far, he's been pretty good at that. Only 2 interceptions so far, but keep the ball off the ground, limit the turnovers. That's one thing that Arkansas's defense is going to want to do, is to get turnovers in this game. They need extra possessions. They need all the help they can get, really, when you're going up against this Tennessee offense. But I like the offensive line. I do feel like it's the weakest point on the offense, but it's not a weak unit, right? It's really not. It's a upper half of the SEC at worst. And I think that, getting Lance Hurd back would be a huge step in the right direction as well. But ultimately, I mean, the Vols offense is the strength of this team, and I think that Arkansas is going to have their hands full with this one. And really, the matchup for me is the offense for Arkansas against the defense for Tennessee. I know we'll get to that here in a minute, but to me, I know that Tennessee's offense is going to put up some points in this game. I'm wondering if Arkansas is going to be able to hold serve and score whenever they need to as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's a big question mark, and hence the almost 2 touchdown spread there. Let's talk about that Tennessee defense. It's been a really, really good one, Mason. This defensive line group has a chance to be a historic defensive line group at Tennessee. It's really talented. It's really deep. And it's just really good all around. 50.75 yards per game rushing allowed. This is the same defensive line group that allowed Oklahoma to rush for 32 yards in their football game, right? So whenever this team zones in on a run game, they've been really, really good at limiting it. Now, I'm interested to see how Tennessee handles a running quarterback, which Taylon Green definitely is. We'll talk about Taylon Green and the issues that he kind of presents in the run game. And this has been a good offensive group for Arkansas as far as yardage, converting on third down. We're going to go over some of their stats, and they're going to surprise you guys. They just haven't exactly turned it all into points. And Tennessee has been a team that has barely even let anybody in the red zone. So this is literally an immovable object here on this defensive line. You see some of the guys that we have listed here. There's a ton of them that aren't listed here. I could make 3 different slides with 4 different guys on each slide, and they've all contributed in one way or another on this defensive line. And I don't suspect that that's going to change. I think that that's going to continue. You're going to continue to see tons of rotation, keep bodies fresh. We'll see if we'll see if Arkansas is able to, whenever they trade players out, maybe they get Tennessee in some type of defense that they like, some kind of personnel that they like, and maybe go hurry up a little bit in this football game. I wouldn't be surprised to see that and try to trap some guys out there that maybe you want. But pick your poison on this defensive group here, at least in the front 7 for the defense. And I love a guy who's not listed here, Kean Peely. Love that guy there in the middle of the defense. I know he had a little bit of an injury. I assume that he is back, ready to go. I know he went down, and then I think maybe came back in the game, in the Oklahoma game. If I'm not mistaken, I think he came back in. But you Tennessee fans can let us know in the comment section if he'll be, 100% ready to go. But he's the play caller, the signal caller on this defense. He's the field general out there, and he's out there to lay some serious lumber. What's your overall thoughts on this defense? It hasn't been one that's been like going and getting a ton of sacks. But you can also point to a lot of the offenses that they played really getting rid of the football quickly, um, knowing that they're not going to have much time. Hence the fact that there hasn't been many plays downfield on this Tennessee defense in this 2024 season.
Yeah, and that kind of feeds right into Taylon Green and his skill set. Look, we know he's good with his legs, but he can hold the ball a little bit too long. I'm concerned with him as a passer in this football game, going against this defensive line for Tennessee. He tends to really try to just make plays a little bit too much and not just throw the football away. It's cost them. It cost them in the Oklahoma State game. He was just kind of holding the football a little bit too long. Had a few miscues there. But to me, my question for the Tennessee defense in this game is can they contain Taylon Green? Because what he's able to do with his legs can really diffuse the pass rush of Tennessee. If they over pursue, he can take it up the middle if he needs to. But can Tennessee maintain their containment on the outside? Because having to account for the legs of this quarterback can really cause havoc on any defense, and in particular the secondary of Tennessee. They're gonna have to keep eyes on Taylon Green in the backfield, which causes a lot more man coverage on the back end of the defense. So that's the chess match that I'm looking for in this football game, is how they contain Taylon Green on the outside, and if the defensive backs for Tennessee are able to hold up against a really good wide receiver unit for Arkansas. I mean, they could really struggle in man coverage against the Razorbacks in this one. But ultimately, I think that it really starts up front with the defensive line for Tennessee, and whether or not they can get home on Taylon Green, or at least contain him and keep him inside the pocket and force him to make some throws.
Let's talk about Taylon Green in this offense. Taylon Green, of course, coming over from Boise State, has had a really, really good career. 44 touchdowns responsible for. You're right, Mason. He's been a little bit of a deer in the headlights at certain moments throughout this season, and then at other moments, he's been really, really unbelievable. Honestly, his play a little bit reminds me of, Nico, in a sense.
Yeah.
I could see Nico and him, kind of like doing the same stuff. I mean, these guys are built the same. They run really similar. I feel like, arm wise, just in two totally obviously different teams. And Taylon Green is not blessed to have some of the teammates that Nico does there at Tennessee, obviously. But yeah, right. This wide receiver group for Arkansas, if they have time to get the ball out, they've got some great wide receivers. They really do. Armstrong is a really, really good one. They've ran the ball really successfully this season. We'll kind of look at some of their stats and stuff. But it's going to all start with that group up front offensively for Arkansas. And the two tackles that you bring in the offseason were a huge, huge pickup. That was the biggest bugaboo for Arkansas last season, is the fact that the ex-offensive line coach, Sam Pittman, didn't have an offensive line at Arkansas last year. I mean, it was no secret. They were just one of the worst in the country. You bring in Fernando Carmona, Keyshawn Blackstock. Those guys go to your tackle spots. The Joshua Braun, Patrick Kudis, however you pronounce that. Those were your tackles last year. So they scoot in to the interior there, and then you got Addison Nichols that you promote from within there to take over the starting center spot. And you don't have a ton of guys behind them that you're just like, wow, okay, we got to get him on the field somehow, right? That's not exactly this offensive line group. It's not crazy deep, but it's a lot better than it's been the last couple of seasons. And I told you you'd be a little bit surprised at some of these numbers. And I don't know why we would be surprised, honestly, because Bobby Petrino, everywhere he's went, where he's actually had control of the offense, minus Texas A&M last year, where Jimbo wouldn't release the stack of papers on the sideline. This guy's been really good everywhere he's went, and this is no exception. This is his first season at Arkansas, and, I hate to say it, I hope nothing happens to Sam Pittman as far as getting fired or whatever, but if he does, Bobby Petrino is probably the one taking that job. And he's leaving his mark on this offense. 21st in the country rushing yards per game. Third in the country, plays 10 plus yards. This is an explosive offense. They explode. Third down conversions, they're really good on third down as well. So not only are they explosive, but they're getting yards on first and second down through the rush game, and they're staying ahead of the sticks. So it's just been being able to put points on the board and the turnovers. And really, the red zone touchdown percentage is not bad. 70.83, that's 33rd in the country. It's the sacks allowed, right? Taking sacks when you don't need to take sacks. It's putting balls into spots you don't need to put balls in there. It's stuff that is very correctable. Very, very correctable. And with Bobby Petrino at the helm, I fully suspect that by the end of the season, you're not going to be seeing some of the same mistakes that you saw early in the season with Taylor Green. This has been a learning curve for him. I love his ability to be able to read defenses and know to either keep it or hand it off. He seems really, really good in that read option game. The mistakes that he needs to clean up, I think can be cleaned up over time, and I don't think it's something that has to be completely done in the offseason. I think they can correct some of this stuff now, although it may be tough to do it this week with not having a lot of time back there. What do you think about overall this Arkansas offense? I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but Andrew Armstrong, a really, really nice piece there in the wide receiver room. Some of these other guys are just kind of dudes. I really like Jaquindon Jackson there at the running back position. That guy's a hoss, replacing Rocket Sanders from last year. I think he's done a pretty good job in that situation, and bless old Rocket Sanders' heart from last year. He didn't have the offensive line that Jaquindon Jackson had either. But what do you think about this offense overall for 2024? Pretty good numbers for Arkansas. I wasn't expecting the numbers to turn out that well. Pretty clear what they've got to clean up.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you how much of an impact an offensive coordinator can make on a team. And this is really the side of the football that I'm interested in watching. I want to see the chess match between Bobby Petrino and Tim Banks. How can Tim Banks, the defense coordinator for Tennessee, handle this offensive scheme with a rushing quarterback that can really run it? I don't think Jackson Arnold was necessarily the talent with his legs that Taylor Green is, and then you throw in Jaquindon Jackson, who's way better as a running back than anybody on Oklahoma's roster. The guy's already got 9 touchdowns on the year. I mean, you look at the passing touchdowns for Arkansas, and they've got 5 on the year. No receiver has more than 1 for Arkansas, and the reason for that is because Jaquindon Jackson is just hogging them all. Him and Taylor Green. Taylor Green's got 4 on the year as well, so 13 on the ground between the two of them. And but the receivers are getting the production. I mean, Armstrong's got 420 yards receiving so far this year. Sategna's got 240. Tesla has over 200 as well. So they're getting the production and the wide receiving room. They're just not getting the touchdowns. I do think that they will need to convert a lot of those passing plays to touchdowns in this football game. I don't think that running the football is going to be all that effective for this Arkansas team that's going to need to score touchdowns. This isn't, you can't get down the field and kick a field goal. That's not really going to do it against Tennessee. However, I will say that if you're able to get those long methodical drives that we saw Kentucky do against Ole Miss last week, then that could really help Arkansas in this game and could lead to a win for them. But ultimately, yeah, I really like Bobby Petrino. I really like him in this offensive system with Taylor Green at quarterback. I think it's a perfect fit for what Bobby Petrino likes to do. He's in places he's been most successful. He's had rushing quarterbacks. You look at with the Falcons, he had Michael Vick. You look at with Louisville, he had Lamar Jackson. I mean, Taylor Green kind of is that guy. So it's a pretty dangerous situation. I don't think we've seen the best of this offense yet. And I mean, boy, they could really make a statement if they could hang 30 on this Tennessee defense this week.
That would be a statement. We'll see.
It would be a statement, but not saying it's going to happen, y'all. I'm just saying. Hey,
right,
if they score 70,
if they score 70,
that's saying something. You know, I'm just out here breaking news, y'all.
Oh man, hot take, Tommy. No, we got to play devil's advocate here on the First and Long College Football Show. And look, Arkansas is a better football team than the public understands. They don't have all the wins this year, but I'm telling you right now, this is a much improved football team. And I went from earlier in the season thinking, you know what, Sam Pittman needs to be fired, to, you know what, maybe they're on to something. If they can hold on to Bobby Petrino, at offensive coordinator, maybe this team's on to something. But it's going to take more than 1 year to do it, and they've got more than they can chew on this week. The only thing they've really got going for them is this game's at home. But let's talk about this defense, okay? Because I kind of want to talk about this defense versus that Tennessee offense. We talked about the Tennessee offensive line, but we didn't talk about a lot of the playmakers. So I just want to kind of talk about those playmakers versus what we're going to see in this football game as far as defensively for Arkansas. Pictured right there is Landon Jackson, Mr. Clean there. He's a bad dude. Landon Jackson is a bad dude. Eric Gregory, Cameron Ball, they've got some dudes on this defensive line that are tough to deal with. I mean, they really are. Now, can you lean on these guys throughout the game, and then in the fourth quarter, you start to see the wearing down of that defensive line? Absolutely. They're not deep. They're not real deep. But this front group, if they can get you off the field and conserve snaps, then watch out. They can hang in there throughout the football game, and they can really cause you a headache. Where this team really is just not very good is explosive plays from scrimmage, and most of those were in the passing game, and just passing yards per game in general allowed per game, 226.4. That's good for 89th in the country. Teams have made their hay against Arkansas through the air, and they've done it pretty consistently this season. Tennessee, we haven't really seen, and this is early in the season, we haven't seen Tennessee play like a ton of, crazy opponents or whatever. But in the big games so far this season, we haven't seen Tennessee go crazy through the air or anything. This is an opportunity, I think, for Tennessee to be able to do that. I think if Tennessee, and they're obviously run first. I get it. They're always going to run the football first. We got to establish the run. Dylan Sampson is the man. That spin move is crazy. So that's all that goes without saying. But Tennessee's going to have an opportunity to air it out a little bit in this football game. And I want to see what they can do against the secondary. Thornton, Dante Thornton, been the leading receiver this year, 242 yards. His average is at 34.6 yards per reception this season with 3 touchdowns. I want to see more of that guy. Brew McCoy, we got to get him in the end zone this game. There's no reason not to get him in the end zone. Chris Brazzell has been, just a godsend this season. He's been really, really, really good. Squirrel White, we need to get him in the end zone. He hasn't been able to get in the end zone. And so I'm not saying Tennessee needs to go throw the ball because they want to throw the ball or they want to score touchdowns through the air. I think this is an opportunity that Tennessee's going to have in this football game, at least early in the football game, to be able to stretch this defense out, and then Tennessee's going to have it in any way they want it the rest of the game. I don't know that this is an offensive line that you can necessarily just say, we're going to pound it up the middle on every SEC team that we face, no matter what. I don't know that the Tennessee's offensive line is that necessarily. And they're going to face a little bit of resistance early on in this football game from this defensive line. I want to see them put the ball up over the top of this defense. I know they can protect long enough to be able to do it. I want to see it with my own 2 eyes. Let's see Nico unleash the beast, baby. What do you think about this Arkansas defense? Some of the stats you guys can see there on the screen. Nothing really that great. They're decent against the rush, 93 yards per game. That's really, really good. I don't think they're holding Tennessee to 93 yards rushing. Tennessee is one of the rushing teams in the country, But it's conceivable to think that this Arkansas defense could hold the Tennessee rush game in check, maybe into the third quarter or so.
Yeah, maybe early on, I could see that. And that's when, if you're Nico, you got to go over the top, right? We see that Arkansas has given up a lot of explosives so far this year. So if the running game's not there early, maybe you go over top early in this game, earlier than you normally would in this game, and you kind of pass to set up the run, which is counter to what Tennessee really has done all year long. But when I look at the defense for Arkansas, I think that Xavier Sori has been a bright light for this defense in the middle linebacker position. He leads the team in tackles. He has been causing havoc in the backfield. And ultimately, I look at what he's able to do against the tight ends for Tennessee. Tennessee has been going to the tight ends a little bit more than usual this season. And so, when they go to a 12 personnel set, how do the linebackers match up? I could see Stays getting involved in this game. I could see Kitzelman getting involved in this game. And ultimately, I do think that Tennessee is going to have success. They're going to be able to spread Arkansas out. And then you'll see Nico take some shots in this game as well. He's got a great deep ball. I think you see more of that this week against Arkansas. Arkansas's defense is going to have their hands full for sure.
Give us your pick in this one, Mason.
For this one, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. So far this year, Tennessee's 4-0 against the spread, 13.5 points. I like that it's just under 2 touchdowns. I like Tennessee to cover at 13.5. I have no idea on the over-under because I could see this one getting a little bit out of hand and Tennessee putting up, 50 points on their own. But I also like Arkansas to score a little bit, at least early in the football game. But I think that overall the depth for Arkansas is going to be a concern in this football game. Tennessee may only be up by a touchdown at half or something like that, but I think in the second half they kind of run away with it and end up winning by about 20 points.
Yeah. I could definitely see a backdoor cover in this one, no doubt about it. I think it'll be a little slow going at first. It'll all depend on Tennessee's ability to get over the top, like we talked about. And I do want to mention, you were talking about the tight ends for Tennessee. They're going to be matched up on the linebackers here in this one. It was widely known that Arkansas was just dangerously low on talented bodies in the linebacker room going into the season. Now, I think they've been able to answer a little bit of those questions with Xavier Sori that came over from Georgia. He's actually, it seems like he's panning out. I'm not saying that he's, going to win the linebacker of the year award or anything like that, but it seems like he's panning out. So it's just an area to watch. I think you're on something there with the tight ends. I could see this being a game where, and it seems like Nico has really likes to go towards the middle of the field. I mean, we have a limited sample size for him, so we'll see, how that kind of changes over his career over the next couple of years. But seems like he really feels comfortable going to the middle of the field there in this offense, and with the linebackers kind of being in the shape that they are, I could see that being a big possibility in this one. Look, guys, I'm not, I'm not an idiot. I'm not taking Arkansas plus 13.5 here. I just, you know, am I betting on this one at all? Probably not. I'm probably not going to bet on this one, and here's the reason why. I gotta see Nico go on the road and do it one more time. Let's see him do it, and if Arkansas can somehow put the game in his hands, and they're in this football game late, how does he respond? I mean, I got all the faith in the world in the guy. I love Nico. I know he's going to be really good. He's going to be a Tennessee great. Possible. I think he's got a really good chance to win a national championship before he leaves out of Tennessee. But he's still a young guy, and there's still a learning curve in this league. And we've seen it more this year than any. It's tough to go on the road and win. It's tough to win SEC matchups. And to do it by multiple possessions, multiple touchdowns, it's just really, really hard to do. If I had to guess, I'd take Tennessee minus 13.5. I think they can do it. I think they're good enough. Over under at 59.5, I would take the under in that one. But, there's a chance Tennessee scores 57 by themselves or something. So beware, buyer beware on that one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the First and Long College Football Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I hope that y'all will consider hitting that like button on the video right quick. And if you're not subscribed, I hope you'll consider doing that as well. Put your comments in the comment section. I'm about to read some of them that came in here as we were doing that last preview and prediction. Richard Patton, thank you so much for watching, Richard. I certainly do appreciate it. Arkansas can't outscore Tennessee, and their defense is going to give up nothing. Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I would say the odds are probably in your favor, Richard, more so than Arkansas outscoring Tennessee and Tennessee's defense playing bad. Which would be the opposite of what you're saying. But I do think there's a little bit of middle ground here, and I don't want to be like a wet blanket or something. I just this is an AC game and it's on the road. Let's see. Arkansas is not a hard place to play, but let's just see what that defense can do, for Arkansas. And, that first quarter is going to tell us a lot. If Tennessee's marching down the field in the first quarter, get on your little betting app or whatever you got going on and bet on Tennessee in the spread. That's all I got to say. Or do the opposite of that. If Arkansas is able to come into this game early and, kind of slow things down, maybe you want to bet it the other way. But I think you're mostly right there, Richard. I mean, Arkansas severely outgunned and outmanned here. J.M. Jones, thank you so much for watching. We certainly appreciate it. Oh, he was talking about Missouri from the last breakdown that we just did. Missouri will sort it out. I have no idea why A&M is favored in this contest. This is a pick 'em if you give max advantage to Kyle Field and ignore the basic metrics. I tend to agree with you, JM. And that was my initial thought this week. And I think a lot of people thought that, I guess, or maybe not a lot, but more than majority because the line's coming down. So that scares me a little bit because I don't like to bet with the public because they didn't build them big old buildings out in Vegas by, paying everybody out every weekend. But I will say this, the last time Tennessee played a football game, Vegas got buried on that. That Oklahoma game where Tennessee was favored by 7, everybody and their grandmama voted Tennessee or bet Tennessee -7, and Vegas never would move the line. I could not figure that out, and they just took a bath on it. I mean, they just absolutely took a bath on that number, and everybody got paid out. Pretty wild. Well, you boys lost me with the comparing Nico to Taylor Green. That's bad football knowledge right there. Well, you obviously don't have any common sense, Hat Creek Cattle Company, because we're comparing styles of playing styles. So you can get your panties out of your ass crack and quit whining. Nobody's comparing. And furthermore, I mean, how many yards does Taylor Green have compared to Nico? I mean, Nico hasn't won anything in his career yet, man. I know Tennessee's really, really good, but he's not the only good quarterback in the world. And, comparing two guys that are 6'6", the same weight, same arm strength, that both have good running ability. I don't, see what you were so confused on there.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the numbers. So Nico's just over 1,000 yards total in offense, and Taylor Green is just under 1,600 total.
So Taylor Green has way more yards than Nico does so far this season. And he's playing on a way worse team. Way worse. But I'm still not going to sit here and tell you that Taylor Green's better than Nico.
No, nobody's saying that. But
nobody
similar, yeah, they're both 6'6". They're both they can do it on the ground and through the air. I think Taylor Green a little bit more on the ground than Nico. But I stand behind the comparison. I think that they're comparable archetypes for quarterbacks.
Type it away. All right, let's go to our next matchup here because we lost Hat Creek Cattle Company with our horrible comparison, so we'll have to go on without him. Do you just want to turn the stream off, Mason, or you want to keep going? I guess we'll keep going.
I don't even know why we do the previews. I mean,
yeah.
for Tennessee, I mean, it's already been decided.
We love you all, but I will respond accordingly in the comment section if you post silly shit.
Well,
All
I
right.
mean, I think people love us more when we do that. So it's weird. College football fans are like sadists. Like they just love it when you talk shit to them. I'm one of them. I'm not just saying you, but I'm one of them too. But I think
Yeah.
that's what makes our channel interesting. We'll call you out when we think you're wrong, and you'll call us out when you think we're wrong, and sometimes we are. But no, I stand behind that.
I guess what I was trying to say, Hat Creek, is we appreciate you watching. I hope you have a good night.
Yeah, that's what we meant. Really.
That's what we were pretty much getting at there. All right. Ole Miss at South Carolina. It's a showdown. It's an SEC showdown at Williams-Brice. 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Ole Miss is a 9-point favorite in this one. Over-under is set at 52.5. Obviously, Ole Miss coming off the big loss last week at home to Kentucky. South Carolina has got the one loss this season to LSU, a controversial loss at that. A game that South Carolina had chances to win, no doubt about it. It's really kind of wild how the football world works. But Ole Miss, or excuse me, South Carolina and Kentucky are so very similar, it's not even funny. And now Ole Miss gets Kentucky last week at home, loses that football game, and then they got to go on the road to a hostile environment here. And believe me, South Carolina is a hostile environment, and they've got to go play the carbon copy of the team that they just played. So Ole Miss has got a chance here to prove that what happened last week was a fluke. Now, as somebody who loves to watch college football and watches an embarrassing amount of it, I'm going to tell you right now, I've watched enough Kentucky to understand that they've got a good defense. And Ole Miss ran into a bit of a buzzsaw, and maybe they were overlooking Kentucky a little bit, but I don't know how that would necessarily be possible after you just saw Kentucky do what they did to Georgia's offense a few weeks ago. And lo and behold, it ended up costing Ole Miss. Let's talk about Ole Miss. We'll talk about South Carolina here after we get done with Ole Miss. Let's just kind of go through our. This is our first Ole Miss breakdown this season, isn't it, Mason?
Yeah,
They
I think
haven't
it
played
is.
anybody yet. So,
Yeah.
Ole Miss fans, thank you for watching. I hope you'll consider hitting the subscribe button. It's okay. Luckily, we're in a 12-team playoff era. The loss last week doesn't mean a damn thing here at the end of the season if you do your business here the rest of the way. So, welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. Come and join us. Let's talk some Ole Miss football here in this one. Jackson Dart, Heisman guy so far this season, right? Certainly a guy that would, if the season ended now, would be invited to New York, and I think would stand a really, really good chance of winning that sucker. 77.4% completion, 1,815 yards. He's on pace to have his personal best season, and it's not even close. It's not even close. I was updating these numbers from this actual slide here from the 2023 stats that we did our preseason breakdown. He is on pace to like double a lot of his numbers. I mean, this guy is going to put up the stats, and that's what you would expect from a Lane Kiffin offense, no doubt. Jackson Dart is the real deal, I think. These wide receivers, again, the real deal. We've got one surprise in the room, Caden Lee here for Ole Miss's offense, and I'm gonna just sweep through Ole Miss's offense here, and then I'm gonna bring Mason in and get your thoughts in total on the offense, and we'll kind of talk a little more about what happened with Kentucky there. But Caden Lee, sophomore from Kennesaw, Georgia, a guy that you were not expecting to step up in this offense, has really done so this season, and it's been much invited. 16 receptions, 275 yards, a touchdown. But we all know the main attractions on this offense at this point. Trey Harris, so far this season, we're going into week 6 of college football. We're doing week 6 previews and predictions, and he's already got 804 yards receiving. Unbelievable. He had just over 900 last year for the whole year, and I thought he had a good year last year. So this guy is on a record-setting pace. I mean, he is literally – is 2,000 yards possible? for Trey Harris? I think it certainly is if he can stay healthy. 5 touchdowns, 16.4 yards per reception. That number was just a tick down, but you just got to figure because he's already got 49 receptions, close, not far off from the amount of receptions he had last year. And Juice Wells comes over from South Carolina, kind of an underlying storyline here. Juice Wells is going to be making his return to South Carolina, and you better believe the Boo Birds will be out because South Carolina fans were not happy about Antoine Juice Wells leaving that program. 14 receptions, 274 yards this season. He's the third leading receiver, 4 touchdowns, kind of your a big target there, obviously, in the red zone and for going for 6 there. Really, really good wide receiver room. And, guys, there's guys behind these guys. There's tight ends behind these guys. The wide receiver room, the pass catchers room, however you want to label it, is fully loaded. This is the biggest issue about this offense to me. And one of the biggest things that I point to last week against Kentucky for that loss, where's Ulysses S. Bentley, right? Or Ulysses Bentley or whatever. He has really been a disappointment this season. And after Quinshon Judkins left for Ohio State in the offseason, hit the transfer portal, we were a little bit worried because Bentley's never been a primary back in an offense. And so you go in and you get Henry Parrish over from Miami. He comes in and he's really been a godsend. 70 carries, 489 yards, 8 touchdowns this season. That's really good. 7.0 average, really good. Matt Jones has surprisingly been your second leading rusher this season, 33 carries, 209 yards, 3 touchdowns. This was a guy that was kind of just buried on the depth chart, and you just happened to kind of have him laying around. And it's worked out for the most part. But it really, I felt like kind of bit Ole Miss in the butt last week. Here's the offensive line group. You make of it what you want. There's a lot of transfers here. It seems like everything's working okay for this offensive line. Giving up some sacks this season, 10 sacks allowed. I think that's kind of the risk you run when you got a running quarterback, but not all of them were on runs. I mean, some of these were dropbacks where they're allowing sacks. So 10 is a high number, 89th in the country. And tackles for loss allowed, they've allowed 21 this season. That's good for 51st. And this is concerning for me in a sense, Mason, because, they haven't played a bunch of teams where you sit there and point at and say, you can understand why they'd give up sacks here. Look at that team. They haven't played anybody. Gave up 4 sacks last week to Kentucky. And don't look now, but you got South Carolina defensive line coming in. There's no rest for the weary. It's another group of killers coming in. But this is the offensive line group. They've been pretty decent, I guess, just decent for a mix and match mosh posh of guys coming from all over the country. These big transfer portal programs, you just never know how things are going to work out when you get everybody on campus. But it's been okay, not the strength of the offense. And like we said last week, Kentucky takes care of Ole Miss 20-17. Look at the stats from some of those from that football game, some of the offensive stats. Because look, we'll put the defense aside. They gave up a big play here and there to Kentucky. But when you give up 20 points, you should win a football game, right? When your defense holds somebody to 20 at home, you should win the football game. It really doesn't matter who you're playing. 92 yards rushing in that football game. That's not going to get it done. You're not able to sustain drives. And even more further proof of that, 1 for 10 on third down. When you can't run the ball and stay ahead of the sticks, you're not going to be good on third down. And this is what happens to a finesse offense sometimes, Mason. And I don't say it to be some kind of an insult to Ole Miss people. Look, I'm a UGA fan. I think UGA and Ole Miss offenses have some things in common in the fact that they're finesse. They're more finesse than they are physical. And a really, really physical team can kind of shake these teams off of their spot. We saw it happen to Georgia in the first half of the Alabama game. They were able to figure it out at halftime, but Georgia, it was really, really rocky on offense and really couldn't get anything going. I feel like that's kind of the trouble with these finicky, really fine-tuned Lamborghini-style offenses where one little thing's off and it can kind of throw a wrench in the gears. And 6.3 yards per play last week. That's not just running the football. That's passing, running, all that mixed together. That's not great. 4 sacks allowed. We talked about that. Turned the ball over in that football game. But did have 261 yards passing, and I would consider Kentucky's secondary to be pretty good. They were missing Hairston, one of their best cornerbacks, one of the better cornerbacks in the SEC. So take from that what you will. But all in all, it was the 261 yards passing were all for naught as Ole Miss lost that football game. All right. I just wanted to kind of set the table for kind of what my thoughts were on this offense. What do you think about this offense for Ole Miss headed into this matchup against South Carolina?
Well, I mean, I think you pretty much said it all, but I think Jackson Dart is first tier SEC quarterback, and he's got some of the best weapons at wide receiver and tight end. Plus, Parrish has been like a really bright spot in this offense and has really been one of the best running backs in the SEC so far. Although last week against Kentucky, we saw him go down a couple times with injury, and we really saw Ole Miss's depth get challenged. I'm questioning, his health going into this game. I think that could be a big concern going against this South Carolina defensive line. But ultimately, I mean, when you look at the game last week against Kentucky, I think what we saw was a Kentucky team that proved that their close game against Georgia was not a fluke. They lost to Georgia by 1 point and played at almost the exact same game that they played against Ole Miss. The quarterback ran the ball pretty well, Vandegrift. They ran the ball pretty well on offense, and they really had these long, methodical drives that kept the ball out of Jackson Dart's hands on defense for Kentucky, and they kept their defense off the field, kept them fresh for the drives when Ole Miss had the football, and that was the recipe for beating Ole Miss. Can South Carolina do the same thing in this game to beat Ole Miss? That's a big question mark for me because so far South Carolina's offense has been a little bit more, touch and go. They've kind of sputtered at times, and they have had more explosive plays, whereas Kentucky's been driving the ball down the field, been very slow on offense. South Carolina hasn't really done it as well, I think, as Kentucky, but on the other side of the football, defensively, I think South Carolina is very similar to Kentucky, particularly on that defensive line. Ole Miss, we were talking about their offensive line. They really got challenged against Kentucky, and that's a really good pass rush for Kentucky. They gave up 4 sacks. I would argue that South Carolina is as good, if not better, than Kentucky on the defensive line. So that's not going to change in this football game. I still expect Ole Miss to give up about 4 sacks in this football game. But that's the weakest part on the offense is the offensive line for Ole Miss. So to me, looking at Ole Miss, if Parrish isn't 100%, I don't know that Ole Miss can run the ball as well as they would like. So a lot is going to be on Jackson Dart, and really what they should really focus on is probably the middle of the field. And I think Caden Prescorn could be a big part of this offensive game plan going into this week, going over the middle. If Hairston's back, he's gonna have a tough go with Trey Harris, but I think that's an area that you're not really looking to exploit if you're Ole Miss in this offense. But ultimately, when you look at the Ole Miss pass catching weapons versus Kentucky's defensive backs, I give the advantage to Ole Miss, and I do think that there is a possibility that Ole Miss wins over the top, and maybe not so much in the run game. I think running against Kentucky's defense is going to be really tough, but I like Ole Miss in their offense in this game. I just think that more is going to be placed on Jackson Dart than on Parrish in this rushing attack, more so than it has in previous games.
Let's talk about the defense for just a second for Ole Miss and I say just a second, and I really mean it because Honestly, there's not a lot of questions on this Ole Miss defense at this point. Now, like I said, we saw a couple of explosive plays for Kentucky towards the end of that football game. That fourth down play, I mean, when Barry and Brown caught, what was it, a 40-something yard pass there along the sidelines on 4th and 3. I mean, who was expecting that? The cojones to be able to call that play. I mean, I wasn't expecting it. Surprised me. So I won't hold that against Ole Miss too much there. But look at these stats. I mean, there's only one thing on this page that you can really point to, and that's pass yards per game allowed. And I really don't even like pointing to that in this situation because Ole Miss has been up in so many football games this season because they haven't played anybody up until last week that every other team had no choice but to throw the football. They had absolutely no choice when you get behind quick, like you do, Ole Miss in this offense, and when you're a lesser talented team, they put up points quick, and then you're behind, and you feel like you've got to throw the ball. So take that with a grain of salt. Look how good they've been on third down, fourth in the country, 22.5%. I mean that is, and that carried over to the Kentucky game. Kentucky wasn't amazing on third down. 18 sacks gained. This team doesn't only, play good uniform defense. They create havoc. They've created some turnovers, 7 total this season. 4 of them, I believe, were interceptions. The other 3 fumbles. So secondary's been able to at least turn the ball over some. Even though they've given up some yards. I like this defense. Pete Golding has aged like a fine wine at Ole Miss. Honestly, he was kind of kicked to the side there by Alabama, or was going to be kind of kicked to the side, and Alabama fans were ready to run him out of town on the first thing smoking, and he ends up at Ole Miss, and for all intents and purposes, looks like he's got the defense, lined up where they need to be. They know their assignments, and looks pretty organized. This is a complex defense that Pete Golden runs, and I think it takes really high-end players, and for the most part, I think Ole Miss, has went into the transfer portal and been able to go and get some of those high-end players that's translated to some good numbers defensively this season. What do you think about the Ole Miss defense?
Yeah, I really like Chris Paul in the middle of the defense and what he's been able to do. And then, you talk about Pete Golden coming over from Alabama. Getting Trey Amos to come over from Alabama was a big addition to this defense. He did get a couple of PIs called in the game against Kentucky, but yeah. I don't think any less of Trey Amos in this football game. I think he's going to be ready to play this week. I think he's still their best DB, potentially their best player on defense just in general. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the defense and what they brought in along the defensive line, with Princely Umanmielen, coming in over, Princely U coming over from Florida, and I mean just the pieces overall that they've been able to bring in. I do think that they have really kind of meshed together really well overall, and I think it's kind of been a surprise. We wonder about this experiment with Ole Miss. Can you bring in transfer portal players? Can they gel together, specifically on defense, specifically in the back end of the defense? So far, they've done a pretty good job of that, and it really starts up front with the strong defensive line. You can see their tackles for loss, 53 on the season. Holy cow! Like that's incredible through just a few games so far this year. I think that against this South Carolina offensive line, I think that they're going to eat. It's going to be pretty tough sledding for the South Carolina offense to get going. I think that this is kind of the game, because as good as Ole Miss's defense has been, nobody's talking about them. Nobody's talking about them like they're talking about Tennessee and how much more improved they are, and Miami and how much more improved they are. Well, Ole Miss has equally been improved as some of those other teams in the country, and I think that this could be a game where we look at. I think real college football fans are going to watch this game and say, Yeah, Ole Miss, their defense is for real, and they came to play. Now that they've got to play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after losing to Kentucky. If you want to make the playoffs with Ole Miss's schedule, which is pretty light, there's no more room for error because you got Georgia coming later in the season, and that's going to be a tough matchup. You don't necessarily have to win that game against Georgia if you can win the rest of these games. But it starts with South Carolina this week. I like Ole Miss's defense in this matchup.
Yeah. Let's talk about South Carolina here and what they're going to bring to the table offensively. It looks like Lenora Sellers is going to be back for this football game. From everything I heard, he was ready to go back in against Akron this past week, and they held him out for good reason. You didn't need him against Akron, obviously. Robbie Ashford did his thing and had a nice day, and South Carolina took care of them, no problem. With him coming back, I felt like before he left, we were starting to see some progress for this South Carolina offense. And I agree with you on the offensive line part of this matchup. I think this is a really, really tough matchup and a tough ask of this offensive line that started off the season really, 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 really rough. 16 sacks allowed. That's good for 126 in the country. For a team like Ole Miss, who's top 5 in the country in sacks, you got to sit there and scratch your head and say, all right, is South Carolina going to be able to protect and develop anything in the passing game in this football game? We'll see. I mean, that's a big question for me, and I think a big reason why this line is over a touchdown. 4.16 yards per rush this season. Rocket Sanders has been a big part of that. 57 carries, 286 yards. He's averaging 5 yards a rush this season. Honestly, he's played a whole lot better than what I anticipated that he would in the preseason, to be honest with you. We felt like at the end of the season last year at Arkansas, he just seemed really slow, and I think he was just a bit demoralized, after such a bad offensive line that he was running behind. This one in South Carolina is better than the one in Arkansas last year, hands down. And Rocket Sanders is doing his best to take advantage of it. Nick Harbor, a guy that everybody's been itching to see. Olympic speed from this guy. He's got 4 catches, 35 yards this season, no touchdowns, 1 rush for 1 yard, no touchdowns. I don't know if we're ever going to see Nick Harbor at it 100, fully developed into this game. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. And this offense really, really needs him, man. I mean, really, really need this guy to step up. Your 2 leading receivers here, Bennett, who's got 11 receptions for 159 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and then Jared Brown there, 7 receptions, 98 yards. Just not a whole lot of production there in the wide receiver room. Simon from tight end provides a little bit of help there, as well as Smith. They got 12 catches combined for about 130 yards or so put together, 1 touchdown. There just hasn't been a lot of production offensively through the air for this team. Lenora Sellers likes to run the football a little bit. They're going to definitely try to establish the run with Rocket Sanders. I'm a little bit frightened by the fact, that they're about to go against a really, really good Ole Miss defense here. I'm a little bit suspect of this offense in this spot. What do you think?
I completely agree. There's just a lack of weapons. When your quarterback running the football is your scariest aspect on offense, that's concerning when you're going against the defense that we just hyped up for Ole Miss. And although Rocket Sanders has been okay, he's still only averaging 5 yards a carry. I mean, that's not like world beating. That's probably not top half in the SEC for starting running backs. I'm concerned when it comes to the weapons on offense for South Carolina. Most of their production has come on the defensive side of the football and what they've been able to do in creating short fields basically through their defensive play and their special teams. But the offense is leaving a lot to be desired. Now, Lenora Sellers coming back, I think, does help because we saw him getting better and better as weeks went on. And then, he goes out. And look, I mean, Robbie Ashford has played pretty well, but most of his effectiveness has been with his legs. I think that South Carolina will have a little bit of a tough road if they're trying to run the football, whether it's with their quarterbacks or with their running backs in this football game. We did see Kentucky do it pretty effectively, but I think Kentucky's better on the offensive line than South Carolina at this point in the season. I don't like this matchup for South Carolina, but it is a home game. Maybe that gives them a little bit of some juice, but I'm not favoring this matchup for South Carolina.
Well, let's talk about the strength of this South Carolina team, which is the defense, and specifically the defensive line. It's been a godsend, Dylan Stewart, this season. The freshman there, top right of those four pictures, number 6'6", 248 pounds. And look, some of these stats I actually did not update all the way, so that's my bad, guys. So some of these tackles and things like that was a couple of games ago when we broke South Carolina down. But Kyle Kennard coming over from Georgia Tech, he's had an unbelievable season this year. These ends for this South Carolina defense are just game breakers. Dylan Stewart, while there is some film out on this guy now and people know a little bit more about what they're dealing with, I am worried about Ole Miss's offensive line against these guys. Like, Dylan Stewart flashes he's an NFL first-round pick if I've ever seen one. The speed rush is unbelievable. He'll just straight up bum rush your ass, and then the very next play, you'll go out to block him, and he's already around you. I mean, he's just unbelievably athletic. Kyle Kennard brings more of that experience to this defense and the defensive line. Tonka Hemingway, DeAndre Jules, a couple of really good guys there in the middle that can plug it up. This team has been pretty good against the rush this year. 28th in the country, 104 yards per game allowed, 3.13 yards per rush allowed. That's good for 29th. So top 30 in the country, pretty much every metric you want to look at as far as stopping the run. And, that's kind of feeds into what I talked about with Ole Miss and their offense. They have trouble running the football, and I compared them to Georgia. Georgia's having trouble running the football. Not a ton of great running backs in those running back rooms right now. Not a super physical offensive line. I'm worried about Ole Miss's ability to match up with this defensive line, and I think that it's going to cause some serious issues for Ole Miss. Now, 1 for 10 last week on third down for Ole Miss, and I don't know exactly what their average yards was to go on that third down, but I know they were behind the chains. They were behind the chains every time they had a third down, just about. So that's going to be is getting ahead of this defense on first and second down. Ole Miss has got to figure out a way to run the football a little bit. South Carolina has, I think, the upper hand here as far as that goes. What do you think about this defensive line? It's been one that we've talked about a couple of times this year, and they just haven't disappointed. 14 sacks, that's 16th in the country. 28 tackles for loss, that's 50th in the country. Pretty much every metric you want to look at, man, this is a really, really good group, and probably one of the biggest surprises of the SEC, in my opinion, this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, when you look at the defensive line specifically for South Carolina, I think that they're probably top 3 in the SEC right now. And really just kind of do a great job of creating havoc. Kyle Kennard, 5.5 sacks on the year so far. He's coming at you on one end, then Dylan Stewart coming at you on the other end. Imanwari, has done his thing so far. I really like the defense for South Carolina. I don't question the defensive line at all, and I think that with as disruptive as this defensive line has been for South Carolina, it makes everything easier on the back end of their defense. I'm just concerned that it's not going to be enough against Ole Miss. This is not Kentucky's offense. I understand that, when you look at what Kentucky did last week against Ole Miss and they beat Ole Miss, and then you say, well, South Carolina beat Kentucky handedly at home. South Carolina should win this game. Well, we know that college football doesn't really work that way. It's more so about the matchups. I just don't feel like South Carolina is going to win in the matchups in this game, but I do like their defense. I don't think that Ole Miss is about to come in and hang 50 on South Carolina or anything like that, but let's not fool ourselves in thinking that just because South Carolina beat Kentucky and Kentucky beat Ole Miss, that means South Carolina is going to beat Ole Miss. That's not how it works. I think you see a much different team for Ole Miss come through this week, and I really like the defense for South Carolina, but like I said, I just feel like they're a little bit overmatched here with Ole Miss.
Let's talk about this secondary, because this is another strength for this defense. This secondary is really, really good, and I'm interested to see how they match up in this football game with Ole Miss and all those great wide receivers that we mentioned there at the top of the video. Nick Emanwari, really, really good player there at safety. DQ Smith playing on the other side of him. That's your strong and free safety there. And Jalen Kilgore is somebody that just plays really high level football there at the nickelback position. One of the cornerback spots, you kind of got, I guess kind of by committee approach going on there, but O'Donnell Fortune is playing one of the other cornerback spots. I really like him. Vakari Swain, Judge Collier, those guys are kind of figuring out who's going to play that other side of that corner spot. But look, I really like the secondary for South Carolina, and I'm not putting it past them to get a couple of turnovers. 6 interceptions so far in 2024. That's good for 18th in the country, top 20 in the country at turning the ball over as a secondary. So 5.1 average yards per attempt allowed there passing. That's good for 9th in the country. 163.8 pass yards per game allowed. That's 23rd in the country. But I look back to the LSU game, right? The secondary played really, I thought, pretty well in that LSU game against a little bit hampered of a wide receiver room there for LSU. And I'm not saying that LSU's wide receiver room is necessarily comparable to Ole Miss's, but they got a couple of playmakers for sure. I thought the secondary played pretty well for the most part there. And I think they've got a chance to, change the game this weekend. This is a group right here. The defensive line is obviously going to need to add some pressure. We've seen teams be able to do that against Ole Miss this season. Bad teams. We've seen bad teams be able to provide pressure on Ole Miss this season. Maybe it rushes Jackson Dart, who feels like everything's on his shoulders this weekend. Maybe it rushes him into some decisions that he doesn't need to be making, and can provide these guys with some interceptions. Look, it's no secret. If South Carolina's going to win this football game, I don't have a ton of faith in their offense to be able to, score 30 in this one. Defense is going to have to hold in there. The recipe has got to be the same as that, that Kentucky Ole Miss game, right? It's got to be stop the run, get them in obvious passing downs, get them behind the chains, pin our ears back, and get after them. And South Carolina's got all the tools they need to do that part. We'll see what Lenora Sellers brings to this offense whenever he comes back this week. Guy's a playmaker. Dude's an absolute playmaker. I really like this secondary. Now, like I said, the wide receivers for Ole Miss are really good. So not saying the secondary necessarily has an upper hand here, but if the defensive line can provide pressure, these guys can cover for, limited amounts of times for sure. What are your thoughts kind of finishing up the defense there for South Carolina? And then you want to take us into your prediction?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the secondary for South Carolina, I do really like really the whole South Carolina defense as a whole. I just feel like the Ole Miss pass catching weapons are the best that South Carolina has seen so far this year. And if Ole Miss can stop the pass rush of South Carolina to some degree, you're not gonna stop them the entire game. You're just not. But if you can get some protection there for Jackson Dart, I think he can pick you apart there. But look, I mean, I do think that obviously playing this game at South Carolina in Columbia, it makes a huge difference. I don't like Ole Miss to cover 9 points is too many points. I think that South Carolina is going to be able to keep this within a touchdown, but obviously I'm picking Ole Miss to win the football game. I think that the under is probably the play here in this football game. 52.5 just seems like a lot of points when South Carolina is struggling to score right now, and both defenses are playing really, really well. Give me South Carolina to cover. Ole Miss wins the game, and also I think maybe as a best bet on Thursday when we do that show, I'm probably going to play the under in this game as well.
Did you say Ole Miss to cover or South Carolina?
I meant to say South Carolina. I don't know what I said.
I think
but
you did. I think you did. I was just making sure I heard that right.
I like South Carolina to cover the points. I think Ole Miss wins by about 6.
Okay. I'm pretty close with you on that. I'm not betting this one with this isn't a best bet for the week or anything. We do a Thursday best bet show every week. Come and join us. It's called Between the Lines. We have a great time there. This isn't going to be one of mine on that show this week. I can tell you that. Look, I think Ole Miss covers the spread, but I think they barely cover the spread. I think it's like 27-17. I think that they just barely get over that 9-point threshold there. 10 is a pretty common number as far as betting goes, but beyond the whole betting aspect of it, I feel like South Carolina's got all the tools necessary to disrupt this Ole Miss team. And this is on the road, and this is going to be one hell of an atmosphere here. I would not be surprised at all if South Carolina figures out a way to win this football game. It would not surprise me at all. I'm going to have my eyes glued to it. It's going to depend on the South Carolina defense being able to get a couple of turnovers in this football game. That's really what it's going to boil down to me. Get pressure on Jackson Dart. He's going to be an obvious passing downs. I don't have faith in this Ole Miss team to be able to run the football here. Made that very clear on this video. You're going to have Ole Miss in obvious passing downs, and it's going to be one-on-one. And I like the secondary for South Carolina. If they can create a couple of turnovers, I think South Carolina can win this game. But I'm with you, Mason, on the under. Maybe the under is something that I'll consider betting this week because I don't think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. Although, pretty close there, I guess. I said 27-17, so maybe I shouldn't. But 52.5, I think the most likely outcome is under on that one. As I don't see South Carolina being able to muster up a lot of points here, and really Ole Miss for that matter either. So give me the under in this one. I think that's the best bet. Can't wait for this SEC showdown there at Williams-Brice Stadium this Saturday. Thank you all so much for watching. Certainly do appreciate it. I want to get to some comments that we've got here in the comment section. Chatsworth 1979 said, nice show. Hey, thank you, Chatsworth. I appreciate it, man. We do our best. We're trying to just call it like we see it here. We're pretty good at pissing people off doing that too. Let's see. See all. Thank you, see all. And thank you, Chatsworth, for watching. See all. Thank you for watching. Literally just curb stomped Kentucky's defense and won 31-6 in Lexington. I 100% saw the game, and I totally 100% remember it. But we've also got to remember something, that teams aren't the same every single week. Teams change from week to week. We talked about that Kentucky-South Carolina game early in the season. Everything that possibly could have went wrong for Kentucky in that football game went wrong. And I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to be able to play a game that bad again. And I'm not saying that Kentucky's not great on offense or whatever, but they're figuring out ways, and they're starting to figure some things out and figure out what their identity is. That Kentucky team had no identity. Their offensive line is clearly playing better. Go look at all their grades online. People grade these guys. Go look at the offensive line's grades from early in the season and where they're at now. They're improving. And Kentucky, with their inability to sustain any drives in that football game, it just kept setting up South Carolina to score. So, yeah, South Carolina scored 31 points in that football game. But it was a little bit of a fluke, man. Short fields, Kentucky just continuously crapping down the back of their leg, handing the ball back. I don't think you can count on South Carolina's offense to go out there and score 31 every week in the SEC. I just don't think that that's realistic. And that while that was a great win there in Lexington, sometimes we see games like that, man. Just an absolute snowball, and it's hard to reverse something like that. That once it gets going in a football game, and Kentucky didn't have the manpower, the leadership, or the coaching to be able to go to the locker room and fix that one.
Yeah, and for some reason, Shane Beamer just completely owns Kentucky. He hadn't lost to them since he's been in South Carolina. That's just a coaching advantage, and I don't know if Mark Stoops can figure it out. I think if that game were to be played again today, there would be a completely different outcome. I don't know necessarily that Kentucky would win the game, but it would be a little bit different. I think that was a new quarterback in Brock Vandegrift getting caught in a buzzsaw early in that game just did not bode well for him. And he kind of looked like a deer in headlights after, things just weren't going his way. They weren't always his fault, and that was the issue. He had no time to react to anything, which credit the South Carolina defense for that. But I feel like that would be a completely different game right now if it were played again.
I think so too. Teams are just not the same from week to week as the college football season goes on, man. Some teams get better as the season goes on, and look, some teams get worse. We've seen it over the last couple of years. Every once in a while you'll see a team actually get worse as the season goes on. So, let's get to our last breakdown, guys. I appreciate y'all so much for watching. Look, I like South Carolina, guys. Don't get me wrong. South Carolina has tickled me pink how good they've been able to play this year. Was not expecting it. Absolutely not expecting it. So I think South Carolina's playing with house money at this point, right? Nothing really to lose.
How did we get through that whole video with not mentioning Cocktober once? That was shame on us. Missed opportunities.
That's the story of my life, dude. Missed opportunities right there. Just like that one. All right, let's jump into our last one. This is going to be the fastest one we've done yet. We're going to go hit the hay. We still got some of y'all hanging around here, and certainly do appreciate y'all. Throw your comment in the comment section, and if you guys don't mind, please hit the like button. It really, really helps these videos out. You guys have been really good about doing that here lately and earlier this week, and it really helped us out. So if y'all could do that again, man, that would just like make my freaking week. Thank y'all so much, and best of luck to everybody this weekend. SMU traveling to Louisville, Kentucky to take on the Cards. It's an ACC showdown going down at noon Eastern. Louisville is a 7-point favorite, and the over-under is set at 56.5. SMU wanted to be in the ACC so badly that they turned down their TV money to be able to do it. This is a program that is hungry as all get out to get back to where they feel like they have a place in college football. If you're like me, you probably weren't alive whenever SMU got the death penalty, but you've probably seen the 30 for 30 or whatever documentaries they've done on it. Absolutely just tore that program apart because they were blatantly cheating. And SMU just never made their way back. And this is their attempt to get back to prominence in college football where they were. They were an absolute powerhouse back in the day. And where this team is located in Texas, it's a recruiting hotbed, donations galore, money to go around, lots of money donated last week after SMU was able to defeat Florida State there at home handedly, mind you. Very, very big win there for SMU and a big, big season for SMU so far. And the Louisville Cards coming off of the loss to Notre Dame last week, turned the ball over 3 times in the first quarter, ended up getting things straightened out second, third, and fourth quarter for the most part, but too little too late as Notre Dame was able to squeeze out of that one with a touchdown victory at home over the Louisville Cardinals. That was not obviously a conference game, so Louisville still undefeated in the conference and has all their goals in front of them, as does SMU at this point. Let's look at some of the numbers from SMU so far this season. It's been kind of hit or miss here offensively in some areas. Passing the ball hasn't exactly been a strength of this team, but been pretty good at running the football. Rhett Lashley made the switch at quarterback over to Jennings from from Preston Stone earlier this season. A lot of people watched that SMU Nevada game earlier this season. I know I did. There wasn't really anything else on TV, so you went and watched it. And if you were like me, you watched that first game of the season, and you said, "Well, damn, if they had a quarterback, they might actually be pretty decent." Well, lo and behold, Jennings is waiting there in the wings, and he's kind of just taking the ball and ran with it, literally. A really good dual threat quarterback. He's young, not the most experienced guy in the world. He's not going to be at the Heisman ceremony, and may not even be a guy that you've really heard about. But he's brought a bright light to this offense, and these numbers are kind of turning around week by week. I feel like right now. But this has been a very explosive team, Mason. 21st in the country with plays of 10-plus yards. They got 79 of those bad boys. And then 21st in the country as far as plays of 20-plus yards at 28. It's been a pretty decent offense. Pretty good on third down. It's just statistically, they're not putting up the most yards, but they're pretty doggone efficient. Pass yards per attempt, 7.9. That's 52nd. That's putting you up there almost top third in the country. So that's pretty decent. Defensively, you can look at some of the numbers there. They're almost the inverse exactly of what they are offensively, right? They're good at creating turnovers, but they give up a pretty good amount of yards, passing yards, particularly 82nd in the country, 224.4 yards given up per game through the air. It's just, look, when we posted our early thoughts video earlier this week, multiple people got on there and commented over on this football game. And it has a little bit to do with this defense and their, ability or inability to be able to slow down the passing game. But they do create some havoc. 27 tackles for loss this season. Not a ton of sacks, but look at that. Turnovers forced. First in the country. 14 total turnovers and have gotten 9 interceptions so far this season. So little bit of a bend don't break style defense here, and pretty good at turning the football over. What are your thoughts on SMU so far this year? Impressive win last week. It's been kind of a journey for them as the seasons went on, but they're in pretty good shape in the ACC at this point. Would need to get the win here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the defense has been better than we expected coming into the season. They're 22nd overall on defense, which is a little bit of a surprise, when you look at them, especially after week one, and we just kind of felt like SMU was bound to have kind of a bad season. I mean, they struggled against Nevada, which was a team that we just expected them to blow out. Then they lose to BYU by 3 points. It was a heartbreaking loss. Little did we know BYU's pretty good this year. So that's a decent loss in hindsight. But at the time we were thinking, man, what the heck's going on with SMU? But they get the big win against Florida State, which I think says more about Florida State than it does SMU, but it was a pretty decided win as they were 6-point favorites and won 42-16. So that was a big win, and I think that this offense has really found something with Jennings. I going into the season, it seemed like Preston Stone was a veteran, experienced quarterback, wasn't going to make a lot of mistakes. And then, once a couple of games were played, we're all kind of just thinking, man, this guy's pretty bad, actually. And then Jennings comes in, kind of saves the day. Looks like he's a much better fit for this offense and adds some dynamic abilities in the passing and in the running game as well. So really like what I've seen out of Jennings so far. But couple that with a defense that's playing really well, a defensive line that's playing phenomenal. They've got 10 quarterback hurries on the year already. It looks like a pretty good team in the ACC this year, which is what we said going into it. We thought that the SMU would be kind of a dark horse in the ACC this year. I don't necessarily know that they're equipped to win it, but it does seem like they're an upset team for me, for the rest of the season. This is going to be a really tough matchup with Louisville. We'll get to Louisville here in a minute, but I do like what I've seen from SMU so far in their first year in the ACC.
Yeah, just to kind of mention some of the playmakers here on this offense. R.J. Maryland, the tight end, is actually your leading receiver this season. 16 receptions, 221 yards, 3 touchdowns. Bailey there at wide receiver, your leading wide receiver as far as receiving. 11 catches, 170 yards. Look, I mean, this wide receiver room, if you look at it, the pass catchers, whatever you want to call them, you can kind of point at this and say, maybe this has a little bit to do with the lack of production as far as pass yards per game and things like that offensively. There's not really a big-time playmaker as far as a pass catcher on this team. That would be, I think, the biggest bugaboo of this offense. While they've been good at running the football, um, this offense has really spread the ball around trying to figure out who's the playmaker here. There's at least 12 guys here with catches. Your third leading receiver for the season is your running back, Brashard Smith, who's had a really nice year, 70 carries, 509 yards. That's good for 7.3 yards a pop with 7 touchdowns for him. So just a few of the playmakers there and kind of areas of concern for the offense. Let's jump over to Louisville, and we'll look at some of these same stats. And we just broke down Louisville last week, and look, I really like this team, and they're one of those college football teams. You know, we talked about how teams are different from week to week. They haven't played their best football yet. They have not played their best football yet. Tyler Shook comes in through the transfer portal in the offseason. You know, it's gone as good as you could expect for him so far, minus that first quarter against Notre Dame. Everything has went great, minus that first quarter. It was just an embarrassment of a quarter of football there, and then everything was straightened up for the most part. Didn't light the world on fire necessarily, but you get Colin Lacey back as far as in that wide receiver room. I really, what's that other guy's name? It's not Brown. Brooks, the guy from Alabama. He comes in through the transfer portal, Ja'Cory Brooks. He's been really, really good. So you've got 2 really good go-to wide receivers there. You've got 5 damn running backs. And mind you, 3 of them are freshmen. I get that. But Isaac Brown, Duke Watson, Kewan Brown, these are guys that I really like. Maurice Turner has been a little banged up, but he's more of the veteran guy. And then you got Donald Chaney that came over from Miami, who's a really, really tough runner. So tons of running backs to turn around and hand the ball off to. A couple of really good wide receivers. One of them you just got back last week, so he's really just getting acclimated. I think Louisville is going to be able to have some success through the air in this football game, so long as they don't turn the football over. SMU's been so good at being there to receive some of those, mental mistakes as far as interceptions go, and they've been really, really good at it, as we referenced earlier. 9 of those bad boys so far this year. 54th rush yards per game, 23rd pass yards per game at 293 offensively. Some pretty decent numbers there, 41.5 points per game. 44th in the country in third down percentage. Here's some of the numbers that, were more concerning to me. 71st as far as red zone touchdown rate. So 62.5% of the time when they get in the red zone, they score a touchdown. That's not great. And I think that's a little bit to do with, the yardage not matching up with some of the point totals in these football games. Louisville only scored 31 points against Georgia Tech. Not a good defense there, and the defense helped them out. Defense and special teams helped this team out a lot in that game. So really struggled to put points on the board while getting plenty of yards kind of between the 20s. This team has kind of been a little hesitant when they've gotten the red zone this season. That's going to need, you're going to need to shore that up in this game, and I think you're going to have a really good opportunity, as it's not necessarily a lockdown defense for SMU in this one. Defensively, this is all Louisville fans in the preseason and going into 2024 felt like the defense was should be a step ahead of the offense. And I told all of them in the comment section when they commented that in Braum I trust, he'll figure out the offense. You want your strength to be on your defense for a Jeff Braum head coach team. And, that's mostly been the case. I mean, it's been a pretty doggone good defense. Look at the third down conversion percentage allowed this season, 23.08. That is an outstanding number there. Rush yards per carry allowed 2.83. Really, really good. You're with some of the best teams in the country there as far as those numbers. 10 sacks so far this year defensively, 42nd in the country. 31 tackles for loss, that's 32nd in the country. And 6 total turnovers forced, that's 62nd in the country. Just okay there, middle of America as far as statistically. But there's not just like one area that you can point to from this defense and say, wow, they're really, really, really bad at that. Pretty decent at everything. And I would say in more of an expertise as far as stopping the run. Did a really good job last week. We all know what Notre Dame can do running the football, right? We've seen Notre Dame run it up on some people running the football this year with Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love. This Louisville defense was able to hold them under 125 yards rushing in that football game. Very, very impressive feat there, in my opinion. What do you think about this matchup, or what do you think about Louisville in this matchup, I should say?
Yeah, well, I really like what they're doing, really on both sides of the football so far this year. I think Tyler Shook, look, he's been healthy. I think that's kind of the main takeaway. We know what Tyler Shook is when he's healthy, and so far he's been able to stay on the field. That's kind of his biggest strength right now is his health. With him, playing as well as he does. Couple that with the running back success that they've had so far on the ground, I think that Louisville can really can really win the ACC, and it starts this week against SMU. It is a pretty close matchup in my opinion, but overall, and you know what's interesting, Mark, is these teams have never played each other. Like, that's a little bit odd, given that both teams were in the AAC at one point. I don't think that they were ever in the AAC together. But it's just a little bit of an interesting stat. And when you look at SMU defensively, they have struggled against the pass. I'm wondering, with Lacey coming back, if he's not able to get involved in this game plan a little bit more, and really, with Tyler Shook as well, with Lacey and Brooks. Maybe they get a little bit more involved there. I do think that they will struggle to run the football against SMU. I mentioned the defensive line and what they've been able to do so far this year. I think that if you're going to win this football game, it's going to be with Tyler Shook and his arm, with some of the pass-catching weapons that they have. Defensively, really like what I've seen out of Louisville so far. They pretty much, when you compare Louisville's defense to SMU's offense, they pretty much win every statistical category. But we also saw Preston Stone for a couple of games this year. So those stats are a little bit skewed when you look at that. I think Jennings adds a different element. So this is going to be kind of a different sort of ball game than what Louisville has seen so far, even against Notre Dame. I think that Jennings is a slightly better passer than Riley Leonard at this point. And I'm curious to see what Louisville does on defense against Jennings in this game. But ultimately, I do like Louisville in this game and on the offensive side of the football against SMU. As good as SMU's been, that's kind of the matchup to watch, right? If Louisville has success against SMU's defense, I think it's a long day for SMU. But a lot of that's going to come from their offensive line not giving up the sacks. They gave up 3 sacks last week against Notre Dame. SMU's defensive front is pretty similar to Notre Dame's and is in their pass rush and in their effectiveness and ability to disrupt the passer. How does that offensive line hold up? Can they limit the turnovers? I think if those two things are a check mark for Louisville, I think that they win this game pretty handedly. But those are big asks, because those are typically what decide football games. When you look at sacks and havoc rate and turnovers, that can ruin your opportunity to win the football game. So, but my pick in this game, looking at what's gone on. Look, SMU has had. They're +7 in turnovers in the last 2 games. I don't expect them to continue that trend. SMU is also 0-6 going back to 2021. They're 0-6 against the spread as a road dog. Louisville in that same span is 13-3 against the spread as a home favorite since 2021. I like Jennings. I like the switch to quarterback, but in this game, I'm going to trust Braum to get the home win. I really like this at 6.5 points. I see on FanDuel you can get it at 6.5 points. I think it's going to be about a touchdown game. But if come Thursday for our betting show, if this comes down to 6.5, I really like Louisville to cover that. 7 or higher, I'm kind of staying away from it. But give me Louisville as far as my game pick to win this football game. And like I said, anything 7 or higher. Anything lower than 7, I'm betting Louisville to cover the spread as well.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I don't love it at 7. And to be honest with you, with the over-under, that would probably be what I would attack in this football game as far as betting purposes go. And I'd bet the over. I think there's going to be some points scored in this football game. We saw Georgia Tech be able to move the ball really well against Louisville. I think that we're going to see some points scored in this one. Now, as far as the spread goes, yeah, I'm with you. 7 is kind of a weird number to me. As far as me trying to put money on that, I don't know. That's a round number that Vegas would love for you to bet, and so I'm with you, Mason. I'm wanting this thing to come to 6.5. So I guess technically I'm taking SMU plus 7 here. And if that number moves, we'll definitely be talking about it on the Thursday betting show, Thursday night between the lines at 7:30 here on the First and Long College Football Show. We hope that you will join us for that. Good luck to everybody this weekend. Thank you for watching. And for those of you watching live, thank you for watching live. We certainly do appreciate it. Just a couple of comments here. We're going to log out. ASAP Talent Services. I like that logo. It's pretty cool, ASAP. The question I didn't hear asked is, has A&M faced – this person is behind a little bit on the video here. Has A&M faced a defense as good as Mizzou this year? And I feel like I did ask that, and if I didn't, I was thinking it. But anyway, one time maybe an Aggies lost that game. Rest assured, Mizzou is better all 3 areas of the game than Bowling Green and Arkansas. And I agree with that 100%. And that's why I wrote no doubt ASAP there in the comment section. I agree with you 100%. I mean, at Texas A&M, they have faced a defense that's better than Missouri's, which is Notre Dame's. But Notre Dame's pretty banged up at this point. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to really dig into that and see which one I thought was better, I guess. But Notre Dame's is a lot more disruptive. Let's just say that. Missouri is really a really good base defense, and they're just not crazy disruptive, not getting a bunch of turnovers or anything like that. Jeremiah, Woo Pig Suey. Thank you for watching, Jeremiah. And thank you for watching ASAP. I certainly appreciate it. Jeremiah says, Woo Pig Suey. Best of luck to your Hogs this weekend. He also says Arkansas defense is legit. It is partly legit. It is definitely partly legit. The defensive line I like. I do like the Arkansas defensive line. Worry a little bit about the depth at linebacker, although it's been a pleasant surprise this season as far as your starters go. I feel like the linebacker has went as well. That position's went as well as possible for Arkansas.
They were bad last year.
Huh?
I said they were bad last year. It's the linebacker unit's been quite improved from last year.
Absolutely. And it was a group that everybody circled and said, oh, no, this group doesn't have enough bodies. And maybe they don't, as the season goes on. That's why I say teams change week to week. But I worry about the secondary a little bit. But then again, we haven't seen Tennessee just like throw all over one of these good teams. We'll see. I mean, I know Tennessee can do it. I know they've got the wide receivers. I know Nico's got, all the tools in his tool belt and everything. We'll see how that works out on the field. Thank you again for watching, Jeremiah. And all y'all, I got to go get off of this thing. My wife is going to beat me to death. So let me get off of here and go lay in the bed. Last comment here. I don't believe Tennessee D-line is better than A&M's. Well, you better believe it, Jeremiah.
You just need to believe it.
You just need to go ahead and believe it right now. Because I'm telling you right now, dude, we can talk Tennessee and we can talk some of their weaknesses and things, maybe the secondary a little bit, maybe the offensive line a little bit, but there ain't we can't go be talking about Tennessee's defensive line and be talking about other teams being better because we just haven't really seen it. We just haven't seen it yet. Look, Texas A&M's got some dudes, Shamar Turner, and those guys are nice. Don't get me wrong. I hear you, but Tennessee has got one hell of a line. They got one hell of a D line, and I think what makes Tennessee so good is they got 12 guys that can rotate on the D line.
Yeah, the depth is what's so much better.
Like and number 12 guy and number 1 guy, there's just really not that much difference. That's the biggest thing for Tennessee. So, yeah. All right, Jeremiah, thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate you watching. He's commenting like crazy, and we certainly appreciate that here on the First and Long College Football Show. Catch us on Thursday. We've got our betting show, Between the Lines, Thursday, 7:30 p.m., as long as we don't have some kind of technical difficulties or something. That's a little 30-minute show that we do, give you our best bets for the week against the spread, the over-unders, all that good stuff. One of my favorite shows we do every week. And then we will obviously be reacting to all the football games Saturday night after they end. So please come and join us for that late night. Bring your beer, bring your own s'mores, and let's hang out here on the First and Long College Football Show. But until then, I'm signing out for the night. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. Thank you for watching First and Long. We'll see you next time.